Hello, my name is Molly Albertine, and today we're going to be talking about the brain safety cushion and how it is being used and studied by a lab here at UNC known as the Shen Lab. So, first off, what is this safety cushion? Picture the brain floating in some sort of liquid, shown here on the left. The liquid provides a cushion and a barrier so that your brain is not banging against the inside of your skull, because that would not feel nice. This liquid is called cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear liquid that surrounds both the brain and the spinal cord. In addition to cushioning and protecting the brain from impact, it also supplies various nutrients to the brain and spinal cord tissue, and it removes waste and toxins. It flows and circulates, so think of it as a moving substance. So now, how does the Shen Lab, which is run by Dr. Mark Shen, use cerebrospinal fluid in their studies? So this lab uses MRI scans, and MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging. So basically think of a big camera that uses magnets to take detailed pictures of the brain, as shown in the image on the left. These MRI scans show the cerebrospinal fluid in the brain. This lab works with infants that have a higher likelihood for autism. So, for example, they have an older sibling with autism, and they take MRI scans of these infants' brains. The MRI does not have any impact or harm on the baby at all, and they can simply sleep through it. And then researchers can track and analyze volumes or like amounts of cerebrospinal fluid in these infants' brains. And before I move on to what they found, I want to define autism and why it's important to study. So a lot of people have interacted with someone with autism or are familiar with the disorder because it is so common. And autism is a developmental disability that affects a large population of people worldwide, and it significantly impacts daily life. So it affects people differently, and therefore various levels of support are needed for each individual. Common characteristics include difficulty with social interaction and communication with others. So, this might look like individuals having trouble maintaining eye contact in conversations, as well as understanding or showing emotions. People may also have intense interest in specific topics and engage in repetitive movements or behaviors. And they could also have unusual sensory experiences, meaning that they could have heightened sensitivity and become overwhelmed by certain sounds, lights, smells, or tastes. But they could also have reduced sensitivity and not always respond to things like loud noises or strong scents. So, as you can see, autism greatly impacts one's day-to-day life, and these signs of autism usually show up in early childhood. So, important discoveries were made by the Shen Lab regarding the relationship between cerebrospinal fluid and autism. So, after 3 independent studies using different groups of children, researchers found that MRI scans of children who developed autism showed a greater volume of cerebrospinal fluid as opposed to infants and children who were not diagnosed with autism. So, these volume differences were observed as early as 6 months of age, which is before behavioral symptoms are typically used to diagnose autism. Also, it is important to note that cerebrospinal fluid volumes are an important clue that can indicate autism in an individual, but they cannot diagnose someone with autism because other factors could be at play, making someone's cerebrospinal fluid volumes vary. Nonetheless, these scientists found an important correlation. So, this relationship and this correlation between cerebrospinal fluid and autism is so important because it offers an early indicator that can give families and doctors more time. The brain is very flexible, so finding this extra fluid earlier could provide the chance to start therapies like speech or behavioral therapy earlier on. Starting support earlier may help children be able to navigate challenges later in life. Additionally, families can then learn more about autism and find resources instead of feeling overwhelmed when symptoms start appearing in their child. Although this research was not aimed to fix or cure autism, it does provide insight into how the brain develops while providing opportunities for autistic people and their families to be more supported. The Shen Lab's findings about extra cerebrospinal fluid are only one piece of a much bigger puzzle, but they provide an important clue to better understanding autism. Thank you.